Alright guys, how you doing? We're on to 11.2 to set the stage. First thing I want you to think about is what were the Europeans after in Africa? Why were they going there? Alright, and then once they get there, some people are going to fight. Key here for the second question, who fought in the Boer War? Remember, think farmers, alright? Again, what are they fighting over? Why do they care? You know what I mean? Nobody ever fights over a pencil. You fight over something valuable, like, I don't know, Krispy Kreme donut or something awesome like that. And how do you think the Europeans are going to rule the Africans? All right? Map over here, kind of useless, all right? Look, it's from Google Images. Oh, there it is, all right? Good. First thing we're looking at here is a map. This is slightly after the Berlin Conference. Remember, Berlin Conference, Europe meets, divide up Africa. Africans have no say in it. All right, so today we are going to talk. What are we going to talk a little bit? We're going to talk a little bit about Ethiopia. We're going to come over here. We're going to spend a lot of time on Nigeria. So we're in Africa. Good. Remember, well, eventually we're going to talk about Egypt and the Suez Canal. Notice French Somaliland, British Somaliland, Italian Somaliland. Very good. Madagascar, nothing to do with the animals. Good. All right. Let me see. Belgian, Congo again. German, East Africa, British, East Africa, French. Equatorial Africa, French West Africa. Good. Look, Spain gets a little. They get Morocco, Spanish Morocco. Good. All right. So what we're going to look at former powers. At the end of the 1800s, colonies were generally seen as a sign of a country's power and prestige. This goes back to nationalism. Our country's number one. Woohoo! We rule. O'Doul's rule. You drool. All right. Awesome beardness right there, people. So what are we talking about? Social Darwinism. On some level, is racist. It's kind of a long-winded version of racism, basically saying survival of the fittest. So if you're rich, you must be fit. Talks about natural selection, leads to the idea of the chosen race. We will talk a lot. In fact, Wordle is about this poem on the 3x3 links, this white man's burden. And the idea of the white man's burden is they're the chosen people, whatever. Hey, if they're the one who's winning survival of the fittest, they have to help the other people. And here, see, westernize the world. Basically, go back to the Renaissance. We know the right way to live. Europeans know what's good. It's our job, the Europeans' job, to go out and teach the rest of the world how to live. How does that look in a map? Again, notice, nationalist unit. You see what's gone on here. Very little taken over. But the rest of the world is kind of getting divvied up. You see America has bought Alaska. They're starting to spread. You see, look at all of the different colors here in Africa. Look at all of the different colors here in Asia. All right, those are kind of the next battlegrounds. Remember the famous quote, the sun never sets on Britain, because almost everywhere in the world, this little country, Great Britain, owns stuff. It's got America's woolly little hat, Canada. It's got tons of land in Africa. It has India. We'll go visit Gandhi in a little while. And then it's got, again, places all over. I've been around the world, and I can't find my baby. All right, so what are we looking at? Early imperialism, 1400s, 1700s, involves the coast of Africa. Thanks to the medicine, thanks to inventions, by 1700s and 1900, it's controlling people all over Africa, economically, politically, socially. Imperialism, ESP, extra severe people, economically, political, social. All right, so what we're going to look at a lot today are the four forms of control. A colony is basically a territory ruled by a foreign power. America was England's colony. A protector is a territory with its own government, but under the control of a foreign country. Think of this like a little brother. He's my boy, I'm going to watch out with him. A sphere of influence is basically a part of another country, or an outside country basically is the only place to trade. China is the best example here. Economic imperialism is a country that has its own government, but basically foreign businesses are so powerful that they run the country. The best example here, Dole. Dole fruit, pineapples, yummy, delicious. All right? And there's two ways you could choose to rule. You could choose to be indirect. Basically, British asked the local chiefs to basically run British rules. Hey, we run your country, but we're going to let you do it for us. All right, that's indirect. There's a middleman. The middleman here being the local chiefs. All right, direct control. French and other European countries preferred stronger controls because, again, going back to social Darwinism, going back to racism, Africans were not civilized enough. And we'll see this vocabulary word a lot. Paternalism. Think about a paternality test. You know, like on jury. Hey, Jimmy, you are not the father. So paternalism refers to basically acting like you're their parents. They avoided training the locals, and basically they brought Europeans in to rule. The French also supported a policy of assimilation. Assimilation is basically the idea that we are going to force these new people to look, act, and become as good as French as possible. Goes again back to social Darwinism. The idea being, hey, if they're not good as us, we're going to come in as the French and take over and say, be like French, say sacre bleu, and go to the Eiffel Tower. Again, 4 forms of control, same exact thing, different picture. Colony is direct rule, governed internally by foreign power. Think about it, America for a while there had British people there running. A protector is an indirect rule government governed by native people who follow orders. So basically a middleman. Sphere of influence is again trading, investment, and economic imperialism is again when foreign businesses have a ton of power. Again, how could you divide these up? Direct, indirect. Direct versus indirect. Direct rules of nations, French, Belgium, Germany, and Portugal. And they kind of made it seem like, who knows, maybe if you're good enough, you could eventually be one of us. Indirect rule, British and the Dutch give the idea, hey, we're just controlling you for a little while. Eventually we'll set you out on your own. Whoa, that was crazy. Let's watch that again. Buckle up. Woo. All right. Direct rule assumes assimilation. Be like us. Paternalism, I know what's best for you. Association theory, basically, wow, aren't you lucky to be associated with us? Good. Indirect rule basically was more empowering. Hey, if indirect rule, the native officials got trained how to be government. That goes back to the idea here of the hope of future rule. Good, we did that. Good, we got to see that like 4 times. That's awesome. All right, pause it here. There's a lot on there. And I'm back. Protectorate. State governs itself but under outside control. You see here how the United States, and on some level that's what we're doing in Iraq right now. The state looks like it's governing itself if you look real close, but there's somebody else pulling the strings a little bit. A colony is a state governed by a foreign power. We talked about that already. A sphere of influence is outside powers control states' investments and tradings. Here you see a political cartoon about what the Europeans were doing to China. This is my part to trade with. No, this is my part to trade with. Have you seen my beard? I should get a big part. Hey, how you doing? What's going on? So, again, sphere of influence, you carve up a country. Paternalism, I love this picture. The mom is clearly telling this kid what to do. Controlling people like a parent, providing for their needs but giving them no rights. So you would be offended by paternalism. Who are these people? What are they telling me to do? You don't know me. You don't know the set I roll with. Assimilation is to make the same. Britain tried to assimilate Africans. You see this really by the French to be more like British people. For instance, if a new kid comes to our school and they're like, oh, they don't do things like Cinnamon kids are supposed to, you are telling them to assimilate, become like the whole. Somehow this apple, I guess, is supposed to go from being red to being green. I don't know. What you see here are what America did to Native Americans. You see, or these may even be Hawaiians, where the traditional long hair gets chopped off. Be more American. Be more whatever. Be more British. Be more French. Economic imperialism is when private businesses from the rich, powerful country run the little country. Sanford Dole basically ran Hawaii. All right? We run in this. Direct control, we talked about that. The goal with direct control is assimilation. In direct control, the goal is to develop leaders. Where are we going to look first? Nigeria. Nigeria case study. For a while, it's a colony under British control under the economic and political life of the area. The Britain conquered southern Nigeria through diplomacy and force. They used bullets and handshakes. And then They basically took the northern part of Nigeria through palm oil trade. In 1914, Britain claims all of Nigeria under its control. All right? Nigeria includes 250 ethnic groups that are now forced to live together. British use indirect control for some tribes. Other tribes get to resent the lack of their own independence. So they take a bunch of people, 250 ethnic groups who may or may not like each other, may or may not be together, and the British go, "You're Nigeria now. Deal with it." So what we start to see are some examples of resistance, fighting against this. See, although Africans resent their colonizers, Europeans have superior weapons. What have they got? They've got the machine gun. All right. Africans resisted Europeans' attempt to subjugate and control them, but the problem is the Europeans have the superior firepower. All right. Here you see an example of a Maxim gun. Samur Toure. Toure is an example of attempts to resist. All right. Here you see a stat: 75,000 killed by machine gun. African resistance. There's unsuccessful attempts in places like Algeria. They're trying to resist French rule for almost 50 years. The French held out. French West Africa held out for 16 years because of Toure had modernized his military. At the end, what happens is the French basically cut off the food supply and Toure's people starved to death. Here you see prisoners captured. And again, in German East Africa, we see this pattern. They're forced to grow cash crops, not food, so they can basically kind of enforce basically kind of create, what's the word I'm looking for? Famine. The natives came to believe if magic water called mahi mahi were sprinkled on their bodies, they would be bulletproof. Clearly that didn't work, and as many as 75,000 were mowed down. That connects to this picture here, right? My bad. In signing a treaty with Italy, Menelik II realized that he'd been tricked by differences in translation between language and that he'd been given control of his country. Menelik declared war on Italy and was able to beat Italy at the Battle of Ottawa. So Ethiopia, under the rule of Menelik II, resists Europeans. And what he successfully does, and none of the other kind of colonies were able to do this, were to pit one European against another. He spent a lot of time turning the Italians against the British, Italians against the French. All right? Ethiopia, again, stockpiles modern weapons, defeats Italy to remain independent. What are we talking about there? Who are we talking about? We're talking about there. We're talking about him. All right? The only other state is Liberia. If you think about it, Liberia literally means liberty, freedom. Look at the rest of Africa. It has some foreign color on it. Look at the French. Look at the Belgian. Look at the Italians. Look at the Spanish. There he is. Spanish. There he is. The Germans. Good. What are the legacies of colonial rule? Negative effects. The Europeans brought all types of diseases with them, the worst of which being smallpox. They brought famine. Why did they bring famine? Because they were growing so much of the cash crop they weren't growing the food. Loss of culture. Again, assimilation. Become like us. Your way's bad, our way's better. Europeans basically forced the end of some of these cultures. And it divided up the African continent, not in the way that the Africans wanted it to be. The Europeans basically came in and said, here's how we're going to do things. And genocide. The genocide, Germany at the century mark attempted to exterminate certain groups, and you see there basically 80% of one population for 50% of another population was killed off, and they did it in two ways. This is really tragic. They either starved them to death or poisoned the wells. So German you can associate with the Southwest African genocides. There's also torture. In the Congo by the Belgium, if you weren't getting enough rubber collected, you were often punished by getting your hands cut off. So both the Belgians and the Germans can be associated with that. What are some of the positive effects? Because these big European powers came in, it reduced local warfare, it improved sanitation, and that goes back to the scientific revolution. It improved hospitals, schools, built roads, telephone, dams, and telegraphs. Sadly, much of this infrastructure did not last, wasn't helpful, was only designed to help the rich European countries and didn't last in Africa. Question. You should pause this and be able to answer all four of these. What were the four forms of imperial control? What were the two methods of management? That's easy, direct and indirect. Define assimilation. Define paternalism, like paternity test. How did the machine gun help? And list two positive and negatives. Alright? Positives, Civil War ended, sanitation, hospitals, literacy, lifespan. The negatives, this is interesting. The lifespan increased for a large majority. For some, it was obviously cut artificially short. Look how these kind of two contradict each other. Lost land, lost independence, lost tradition, artificial boundaries. People that didn't want to be together were forced to be together. People that wanted to be together got split up because the Germans, the French, the Spanish wanted certain things. They didn't care what the locals wanted. We talked about this. And we see the positive effects. And again, these, however, benefited Europeans more than Africans. The patterns of behavior of imperialist countries were similar all over and led to more conflicts worldwide. Really quickly want to show you two quick things. Oh, great, it auto-saved. Let's cancel that, minimize that. Where are we talking about? This is where we saw Torre. Here you see Menelik II. This is directly from your book, this map. This is what we just looked at. This map are attempts at resistance. Remember, the only two successful, Liberia and over here. All right. What did we ask? What were the four things that you need to remember? Protectorate, colony, colony, C, P, S, E. Keps. They kept them under control. Colony, protectorate, sphere of influence, economic imperialism. This is one of the things directly linked on your 3x3 link, were the two types of control, indirect and direct. And again, here's a little bit about Torre. This is what your book, the notes would have looked like. Here's paternalism. They viewed the Africans as unable to handle. They developed a policy called paternalism, basically treating them like kids. And then there's the definition of assimilation. Alright, gang. Video number 2 in the books. By the way, to prove that you watched this, let's have the secret word of the day be Thor. I just stepped on one of Shane's toys of Thor. Have a great day, y'all. Bye.